first thing I'm going to do is initialize an empty Git repository. I'm then going to make sure that there are some files and folders that are not included in Git. So I'm going to go ahead and add the string venv to a file called .gitignore. This is going to make sure that when I add and commit files, the .venv folder is not included. If I take a look at my Git status right now, I can see that I don't see that .venv folder, which is great. The next thing I need to do here is make sure that my dependencies are compatible with render. Since render does not support UV at the moment, we're going to go ahead and make sure that we use pip instead for dependency management. We're going to have to take the dependencies for our server that we set up with UV and make them compatible with pip. The command we want is UV pip compile. So we're going to go ahead and type in UV pip compile, our Pi project toml. And what you see here is the output of turning our dependencies into what pip needs. So we're going to take the result of that, and we're going to send it to a file called requirements.txt. Now that we have that file called requirements.txt, there's one more file that we need to make sure we have the right version of Python for render to use. We're going to go ahead and send the string Python 3.11.11 into a file called runtime.txt. Now that we have the necessary files, let's take a look at Git status, and we can see that now we have requirements.txt as well as runtime.txt. Let's go ahead and add and commit. And here our commit message is going to be ready for deployment. And now we need to take this code on Git locally and bring it into a repository on GitHub. We need a GitHub repository so that render can pick up and load the project files. So in the browser, I'm going to head over to github.com/new to make a new remote repository. And I'll give this repository a name. Let's call this remote research. I'll go ahead and create that repository. And once I've created that repository, I'm just going to use these last couple steps. In order to push an existing repository from the command line, I need to know where I'm sending that to. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this command and go back to the terminal to run it. If I've done that successfully, I should be able to type in git remote -v and see origin as well as what I put in. I'm now going to go ahead and push this code up to GitHub. So I'll type in git push origin. If this has been done successfully, I should be able to go back to the browser, refresh the page, and see that my code is there. Now that this code is successfully on GitHub, let's go ahead and make sure that render can pull it in so we can deploy successfully. I'm going to head over to render.com, and at render.com, I'll make sure I sign up. Once you've signed up or signed in, you can head over to your dashboard. Once I sign into the dashboard, I can now add a new service. So I'll click on Deploy Web Service, or I can always go to New and add that. If I authenticate through GitHub, I can put in repositories that I have, or I can put in a public Git repository if I just want to put in the URL. I'll go ahead and select Remote Research, and the only thing I need to change here is the command that we use to start our server. The command to do so is Python research server.py. I'll make sure right now I'm using the free plan. And once this is done, I'm ready to deploy. This might take a little bit, so give it a second while it starts the application. As we start deploying, we're going to see the commands necessary to get our application up and running, things that we actually saw before when we were running this over. So we can see here we're using that Python 3.11.11 that we specified in our runtime.txt. We're installing the dependencies from our requirements.txt file, since we're using pip here for dependency management. Once this is deployed, when we visit this link, we're not going to find anything, so we should expect a 404 error. What we do want to see is if we go to /sse, we're seeing a response with a session ID back from the server. We're running the command python research server.py. So let's go ahead and see what things look like. The first time you look at this, it might take a second as your application's loading. So feel free to give it a minute or two, and we'll refresh the page. I've refreshed the page, and as expected, I'm getting a 404. If I head over to the SSE endpoint, I can now see that I've made it with this particular endpoint and a session ID. This means that I've deployed successfully. If you want to try this out in the inspector or in other tools, take a look at the resources we have. Great job getting this deployed, and I'll see you in the next lesson.